Hi Gordon. This morning we're going to change the center support bearing on the drive shaft for a 300D. A 240D, a 300D turbo, they all have a similar drive line, and it's a split drive shaft. Toward the front of it, sort of in the middle of it, there's a bearing and a bushing. And when it starts to vibrate at higher speeds, maybe above 30 or 40 miles an hour, you can suspect that perhaps this center support bushing could have gone out. And I know it's out on mine. There's a rubber piece that mounts it for vibration. This is mounted to the body of the car, and then inside this thing is a bearing. And the bearing is just pressed in there, and then that whole thing goes on the shaft. And if that bearing wears out, it's usually going to tear this up too. So mine is out and we're going to replace it, but in order to replace it, we've got to pull the drive line. Now you got to be careful with these drive lines because they're balanced, and so when you separate them, you want to get them back together exactly as they were pulled apart, in exactly the same position. There's a spline, and the spline has to be perfectly set up between those two pieces. So what I always do is mark it, and you need to mark it. Some of the later models are already marked, but the early models were not. It's balanced at the factory, and I just use paint. You know, what I found most useful is I just go buy, for general purposes around the garage, just a little bottle of touch-up paint. It's got a little brush on it. I like white because it shows up so well. So we're going to first mark that drive line with white touch-up paint and then take it apart. The tools that we'll need are just not very many. We need a 15 and a 17 millimeter, I believe. Those are the nuts and bolts that bolt the drive shaft to the differential. And then I've got a set of sockets and a wiggle joint. I think I'll need that in a 3/8 drive, and a couple of extensions and a ratchet. That's going to take off the nuts that hold that on. I need some kind of a big pair of pliers or a short pipe wrench. I might use either of those. There's a nut that screws down and clamps those two pieces of drive line together, and we're going to have to loosen that nut, and it's a big one. One of these two tools will work. It's a kind of a tight spot. I might take them both under the car. I happen to have an air ratchet. The nuts are lock nuts on there, and it just takes a long time to screw them off. But if you don't have an air ratchet, it's no problem. There are only 3 of them, and it just takes a couple of wrenches to get them off. So no big deal if you don't have an air system. Once I get it off, I've got to pull it off of the shaft, and I've got a 6-inch gear puller that I'm going to use to pull it off the shaft. And then I'm going to have to mount the bearing, and what I'm using is a 1 1/4 inch pipe, galvanized pipe nipple. That'll work fine. And then I've got a little bearing set to knock this bearing into this. In other words, I got to mount this bearing into this shaft. But if you don't have these tools, this thing and a gear puller, probably for $5 you could take the whole thing to a machine shop and have it mounted that way, and that might be what I'd do. If I didn't have these tools, which might be expensive to buy for this job, I'd just go to a machine shop, and take you a little longer, but you know, probably for $5 or $10 you could have the whole assembly replaced on the shaft once you get it out. So mostly the job is pulling the shaft out of there. So let's go see what that drive line looks like. Okay, Gordon, the shaft comes from the transmission up here, and it's mounted with 3 bolts right here underneath the body support right here. And then the bearing of interest is right here, and you can see it's mounted to the body of the car right here, and the drive shaft splits right at this point. You can see this nut right here, right in front of the point where the bearing is mounted. Then there's a U-joint, and it goes on to the back of the car to the differential. So right in front of this U-joint is the bearing of interest, but you can see that the spline right here on the shaft where it splits is where the point of interest where I want to mark it. Now, this particular one is a late model, an 82 or beyond, I think, is the year that they changed it. And they put a little couple of dimples on right on the U-joint right here. You can see that this thing is sloppy. If I move it around, see that rubber is all torn. And that's what I want to change. But first I need to mark the shaft. So right there are a couple little dimples, and I want to make sure, absolutely sure, that I get this shaft back in exactly the same spot relative to this short tail piece coming out of the transmission. So I want to put a mark, because I'm not going to take the front part off. So in spite of the fact that it has the mark, I'm going to put another one with white paint there and there, so that I can get it together exactly correct. Now that I've got it marked, I'm going to take these two off. I'm going to have to loosen this nut. And actually what I'll do, I took the...
Which two again? Can you show me again?
Yes. Let me get a pointer here of some kind. Let's see.
I can see the bottom one.
Yes, you can see that one. Well, there's one on the other side that's hidden from your view maybe, but it's right here. So I'm going to remove that bolt and that bolt. The bearing will drop down. And then this big nut right here has to turn to loosen up the spline from the female piece, which is right here, this tail piece. I'm not going to, this piece right here, this tail piece that's on the transmission, I'm not going to take it loose. I'm going to undo this spline right here. That's all I really need to do. So next thing I need to do is loosen this nut right here. This is what I choose to do next. But in order to do that, we're going to have to put that transmission in gear so that this tail piece doesn't turn. Sometimes they are on there pretty tight. But that one's not bad. Okay, now that's loose. That's a 13 millimeter bolt on there. The first one, I'm just going to use an extension and a ratchet to get off. I think, as I recall, it might take, those two are in kind of a nasty spot. I might have to put a wiggle joint on there. Oh, that one's not too tight. Okay, now I might need a wiggle joint, it looks like, to get that other one off. As I recall, I always have to use one to get these things off of there. Okay, so now those two are loose and I'm ready to pull it off, except I got to take those three. So let's go to the back and get the 3 bolts and nuts off that secure it to the differential. Okay. What we're going to do is take these bolts off that secure the drive shaft to the differential, and it takes a 17 millimeter nut on the back, and a 15 millimeter is the bolt head on this thing. And these things are hard all the way off because they're lock nuts. I can usually get 2 of them without undoing without moving the drive shaft, and then I'm going to have to put the car again in neutral to turn the drive shaft. But first, let's take these off, and I'm going to use an air wrench, put some earplugs on.
Why are you only taking every other one off? On those nuts, why are you only taking every other one off?
Well, because 3 of them secure this flex disc to the differential. Sort of takes some of the place of a U-joint. So we want to leave that flex disc on the differential, but it's only 3 nuts, 3 bolts and nuts that hold the shaft to the flex disc, and then the flex disc is mounted to the differential. So I said that was a 15, and it's just quicker with an air wrench if you have one. I loosened the third one with my 2 end wrenches, and then use the air tool to get the.
You want it back in drive?
No, we don't need it now. Now, the shaft separates. Sometimes I need a big screwdriver to kind of pry it loose. Sometimes they're kind of a booger because there's a centering pin in there and it's a very tight fit. There. So it popped loose now, and you can see that now all I have to do is pull it down. Then it gets hung on the emergency brake cable assembly. But there it is. Let's take it up on the workbench. Look at it. Now I can see that you can see that my problem is kind of obvious. See that rubber just wears out, and actually that bearing still looks good. But as long as I'm under there, I'm going to replace them both. I'm not going to mess around and not replace the bearing while I'm at it. So, you know, that's what I need a puller for. This is the piece that if you take to a machine shop and have that thing pressed off of there, it'd be just fine. But I'm going to use my puller and just pull it off of there and then press the next bearing on. So if I can get my puller back there. Better off putting the thing in the vise just to get some that on there. Okay, put my puller on there. See if I can pull that bearing off. Actually, what I've got a hold of right now is the rest of the housing. Now I need to get back on that bearing. That one, as I said, it really wasn't bad. At any rate, that just protects the bearing from grease and dust on the back side. So, next I want to mount the bearing. I've got a flat spot on my vise here that I can use, and actually that doesn't even, I won't even have to use my bearing set on that. Just goes right in there pretty easy. Just use a little block of wood to set that bearing. I've got the bearing now mounted inside that support, and now I want to put the bearing on the drive shaft. So I'm going to slide it over there now. You see, it's supposed to only go one way, and it happens to be that part, this piece of it goes to the front, if you will. That's the front of the drive shaft. You see, the back side of it doesn't have that. It doesn't look exactly as the front side. So the front side is the one with the V in there. So it goes like that. And then I'm just going to use this piece of 1 1/4 inch pipe nipple. It fits on that bearing real well. And just going to tap it on there. Got it in a vise. Might put a piece of wood on there. And you can feel it when it seats. There it is. So that's the end of that. Now we just mount it back onto the car. While we're at it, we might as well mention that this U-joint is not replaceable in these drive lines. It's what they call a staked U-joint. You can see it's bradded. The cups, the bearings are bradded into the U-joint all around. So it's assembled at the factory, and you really can't replace the U-joint. I've heard a story that there is one company in California that'll, in the machine shop, that'll take these out and remount them, put a different U-joint in there. There's of course one that will fit, but the problem is then balancing the drive lines, and supposedly TriStar Pete told me about they think they know of a company in California, I believe, that will balance the drive line, but I've not found out about that company. I don't really know where it is. These new drive lines, when that U-joint wears out, you just have to buy a new drive line, and it costs, one time my price went over $600 at the dealer, so they're expensive drive lines. Of course, this one has lasted for over 200,000 miles, and it's still good. And you can buy a used one from TriStar Pete, a whole drive line. They have good ones, good used ones out of wrecked cars that they'll sell you for a couple of $300. Probably about 200, I think. Anyway, let's put this back.
Okay.
All right. Get that stuff falling in my eyes. Need to put this in, of course, from the back underneath those emergency brake cables. Whoop. What we want to be careful about, of course, is to get the thing back the way we had it. So we got to line up our marks. There's my white mark. Looks like I'm about one spline off. Oh no, let me try it. See if I can get her a little closer. That looks right.
You want a straight edge to judge it?
Maybe.
Like your pointer?
Yeah, as soon as I got my mark, I think I'm one spline off. Doesn't it look like that to you? There. There it is. I'm sure that's right. That's just perfect. I can see it. Okay, now what I want to do before I tighten this nut, I want to put the back end together. Because it has to be slid all the way forward, and then of course it comes back a little bit as I tighten these bolts. So first thing is to get the back end assembled, or at least essentially assembled like that. Put some bolts in there. And there's a washer that goes on the back side in front of the nut. You might consider periodically these lock nuts need to be replaced. If you read the book, it'll say replace them every time you'd ever do this. I've never had any trouble. And of course it is the drive shaft, so You do as you like. As long as they're not worn out, I don't need to replace them. Oop, my light's going out there. Okay, now we're about to get to the air wrench part again. Now I want to replace the bolts, that secure the center support to the body of the car. Sometimes those are kind of hard to get started. I think I got that one. They're in kind of an awkward position. Finally, I want to tighten that nut. And then get my big pair of channel locks. Might have to, I don't know whether I can do this without the car in park, because it's going to have to be tight.
Spoon?
No, I'm holding it. Yeah, we better put it in park to get it real tight. I think it's about tight enough. Yeah, that's fine. The last thing I'll do is take my wrench and tighten up these three in the back. I just got them with that air wrench the first time, but I need to secure them. So it'll just take a minute. As long as we're under here, let's point to one more thing that might cause some vibration. That's if that back motor mount gets broken. The back motor mount is right above this cross member, what we call a cross member. And the bottom of it is mounted with these two bolts. They look like 13 millimeters. The top of it is mounted to the tail of the transmission right here. And what happens is there's rubber, I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here on both sides. And so the thing is kind of suspended in rubber. Maybe you can see it move a little bit right there. See that?
Yes.
And so what happens is that rubber breaks. The way I check them is I just put a jack with a little block of wood right here under the transmission oil pan and just put a little bit of force on the thing so that you move it up. And if you can move it up, and then you'll see if that rubber is broken. If that rubber is broken, of course, that's a source of a problem for vibration, and eventually it'll tear things up. But you should replace that back motor mount, of course, if that rubber breaks, and that could be a cause for vibration. You see that one's pretty new.